Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this summit, day 3. And this first session is a conversation with two people who I think are really among the two most interesting people to have conversations with. Two people that I have learned from a lot and continue to learn from. It's a real special moment to have conversation with Tiokasin Ghosthorse and Vanessa Machado de Oliveira. Our conversation today will be 1.5 hours on the subject of finding meaning amid collapse. And I want to just say a few brief words about the two panelists, and then we'll flow in a conversation together, the three of us, and have also time in the end for you to ask questions and to interact. So Vanessa is a professor at the University of British Columbia. She holds a Canada Research Chair in Race, Inequalities, and Global Change. She's worked across sectors in international and comparative education, particularly focusing on global justice and citizenship, Indigenous and community engagement, sustainability, and social and ecological responsibility. She is one of the founding members of a collective called Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures, and Terra de Cinco Cures, an international network of Indigenous communities, mostly in Canada and Latin America. She's also the author of several books, probably most known by Hospicing Modernity, which we'll also explore in the conversation. Tiokasin is an author, teacher, activist, accomplished musician, a member of the Cheyenne River Lakota Nation of South Dakota, and has a long history since his youth as an activist and advocate. He is also very much known as the founder, host, and executive producer of First Voices Radio, formerly known as First Voices Indigenous Radio, has been going for over 30 years. He's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, received many different awards. He's a perfectly flawed human being, as he says himself, a sun dancer, a speaker on Lakota cosmology and its intersections with quantum physics, and we've been in touch since 2017, I believe, in the framework of the Defend the Sacred Alliance. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for joining. I have many questions, but before we enter, I wanted to ask if there is something that you want to say up front, something to open, to introduce. Either of you, otherwise we can also just roll.
Tiokasin, I defer to you.
Okay. Hello. How about just hello? Good morning.
Good morning.
The recording stopped.
The recording stopped. Great. The recording needed to say something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So maybe I start with you, Tiokasin. You keep making statements that I find surprising in relation to where we are in our world today. And I recently heard you say that there are so many people right now struggling to be here in this moment on Earth, and you say that actually you want to be here, you're happy to be here with Mother Earth at this time. And I would love for you to say something about from which state of being does the statement come? I've heard from you repeatedly, and also what do you perceive is Earth doing or going through at this moment?
Thank you, Martin. Good morning, everybody. Sante waste na page sa pielo may unkipisi. Ohe wastelo Tiokasi. Sitanzi wiki bahami chashi oyate tokai vichaki. Ashunke wadagi. I want to say thank you for all being here. My heart's open to you, and I shake your hands in a good way. And I'm glad you're all here, basically. Martin, there's a lot of thought behind that. What I say a lot about, people need to be here in the moment. An example is just that when I was a lot of Native people that I know of who went through a time in the past, present, and having problems staying in the present, they usually were told that you could not be Native, or in this case, my case, you could not be Lakota anymore, nor could you be Lakota in the future. So the future and the past were taken away, which was a perfect example of who we are as Indigenous people. We have to be in the moment because our language is about being conscious in the moment, no place else. So this is how Earth is. Earth is in the moment, conscious of us as well. So we are actually Earth, becoming Earth all the time. No matter what we are becoming Earth in the sense that we know the air, the water that we will talk about, the fire that's going on everywhere. All these things matter because that's the same as our body. And people are looking for balance, but they're looking to measure this balance. They're looking to measure the earth, which is always changing. In order to change and be with the earth and changing, we need to be in the moment. We can't be in the future or the past because that becomes very dualistic and takes us away from consciously being here in a moment. And I think that has to do a lot with language. When I was interviewing an elder the other day from the Mohawk people, and I asked her about the language. She said she's the first language Haudenosaunee, Onegome, or Mohawk speaker. And she said that when she was young, that she spoke only her language. But when she was taken away to boarding school or went to a public school, she had a hard time speaking this other language. And then after she put meaning away and it went with definition. She understood that English is so quick, it doesn't go deep enough. So it means that you need to move on to the next concept, to the next theory. You weren't able to stay in one place and observe and be like with the tree or even with the water. And that took you out of time and rhythm. So I think this is what we are looking for as humans, is to be in rhythm with Earth again. But you see, we are defining it as humans. And with that mindset of quick, I want the answer now. It's not ever going to fit the consciousness that we need to be in, because we want to control time, we want to control Earth, we want to control, and we have to let go. And that's the first key, is to letting go of control, which leads to me would be a word for domination. So I think that would answer some of your question, Martin.
Thank you, Tiokasin. Maybe also, what do you perceive is Earth doing at this moment? You've spoken about the quality of this time. All kinds of spiritual traditions have different names for it. What does this time invite us into?
To be present. We need to be here to understand what she is going through, but we are so anthropocentric that we only want to understand what humans are going through, not all other life. So we are looking for connection rather than relationship. So if it was a relationship, we won't need to look for connection, because once you're connected, you could always be disconnected. So I think this is an age-old dilemma that we need to really look at, a duality of how we think, how we feel, especially put meaning back into the language rather than just defining every moment and being quick with it, so that we could save ourselves, save the human race, and we forget about everything, all other life. So I think that's part of it, Martin.
Thank you. Yeah, and you had said it already, so.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to turn it to Vanessa. You have focused some of your recent work on helping us accompany modernity's death wisely, or more wiser. I would love to just ask a few questions to get us started on this. Why do you talk about modernity? Others talk of capitalism, others talk of coloniality. Why are you convinced that modernity is dying? Skeptics might say people have always talked about the end of the world. So why is this special? And also, yeah, what is modernity? Who is modernity?
Thank you, Martin. I think I'll start like Tiokasin, greeting everybody again, greeting the land, the ancestors, reminding ourselves that a lot happens for us to have the privilege to be here today with the computers. So we need to remind ourselves of where these minerals are mined and the systemic and structural violence that is necessary for us to be here today. But also the miracle of the opportunity actually to have this conversation, and the privilege and the responsibility that we have, especially as Tiokasin said, that it's a big family in crisis, right? In a certain crisis of this, I've been calling it a dis-ease, and it's a family not only of human beings, but of non-human beings and non-human elements that is currently going through a transition process from one thing into something else. So in my book, I talk about modernity as a story, as a living story. And by talking about it as a story, I want to also highlight how the way we have to make meaning about the world creates a kind of a buffer for our experience of reality. We were in modernity, in the house of modernity, we relate to reality through this lens of specific kind of thick meaning. If it was thin, and then in the book I talk about that too, in terms of wording the world versus worlding the world. So there's a way of languaging that allows us to be with reality and in the move of reality. And there's in modernity a way of languaging that is focused on form, on putting everything into boxes and ranking boxes and putting value in these boxes that is out of pace with the rhythm of the earth and with the rhythm of reality. It doesn't allow us to be in movement. It pulls us into a stagnant place. And that stagnation now, because everything is moving fast, is creating a dissonance, a very, very strong turbulence that then what used to work before to create meaning and give us certainty, control, stability, predictability, coherence is no longer working. And then, so back to your question about why modernity, because modernity as an assemblage of thick meanings then encompasses both the foundation. So we talk about in the book modernity as a house that has a foundation that is the separation between us and the land, the imposed sense of separation between us and the land, which we call separability. And that separability is what creates hierarchies between us and the land, between species, between cultures, between individuals. So everything is ranked according to the value that is produced in the house. Then there are two carrying walls. One carrying wall is the modern nation state that has a specific primary objective of protecting property and capital, because in the separability thing, land is rendered property rather than a living entity. then there comes the nation state protecting it, and then it offers rights to people as long as the rights to people do not contradict the rights of property, as long as there is interest convergence. And then the other carrying wall of the house is the single story of progress, development, and civilization based on the Enlightenment. And that story creates epistemicides. It kills others. It tries to kill other stories. Not that it is successful, but it tries to kill other stories. And then it's the roof of the house that we call global, algorithmic, speculative, necro-capitalism. And looking at it this way, in a kind of more ludic way, to play with the house through a metaphor and making analogies for movement, is possibly the only way to get us out of the logic of boxes. So when I use this pedagogically, I say this is one of many other possible maps that we can use to navigate reality. But we have to understand that these maps are heuristics, right? And also living entities that play with us, rather than trying to arrive at a universal prescription that would command consensus. We can't do that anymore, because reality is already too fast. It has the dialogue of the rhythm and the possibility of languaging it it's not there. We can't index reality in language. What we can do is use language in a thin way to navigate a rapidly moving reality in order to be able to be connected to the rhythm and the relationship there. And what you said, Tiokasin, about connection and relationship, I've been writing about it in terms of relationships within modernity are always transactional. And I think that's what you call connection. It's up to me, and it's based on a calculation, right? What do I get out of it? Whereas if you think about the rhythm of the earth from the perspective of the earth, there is no choice but to be in relation. And it's a relationality, I'm calling it relationality of the whole shebang. And it's not a choice, right? So we're always already relating to the whole shebang. We are tethered, and these tethers need attention, and they need nurturing. And if you're thinking about indigenous cultures, you're going to see that offerings are made all of the time. And in case of the sun dance, Tiokasin, I'm also a sun dancer. Flesh offerings sometimes of your own skin are made to honor the tethers, right? To keep the tethers healthy with everything, not only between human beings, but with the land. And there are many, many lessons there to see what circulates in the tethers, which are the movements that we're talking about. The tethers are not static. The tethers are dancing, right? And they're interpolating you and being with the dance of what some people would call creation, of the earth, of the cosmos, is something that modernity doesn't teach us how to do. It teaches us to protect ourselves from that dance, to create a perfect, comfortable, secure, militarized environment where we don't have to dance. And part of it is its relationship with death, too. It's trying to protect us from pain, from grief, from loss, and from death, but in a way that doesn't acknowledge that pain, grief, loss, and death are part of the dance, right? And are necessary for renewal. So modernity offers us this very specific understanding of time, of being, of language, of languaging, of knowledge, of self, of other, of what security means, of what well-being means. And this is not work. It probably worked for a period of time as an illusion, I guess. But now where we're at with the cost of that illusion in terms of breaching the planetary boundaries, in terms of like we're on a path of mass extinction in slow motion, and it's agonizing mass extinction in slow motion. And at this point, like it is, as Tiokasin, beautiful to be at a point where we have a chance to step up, to grow up, to figure out what to do differently. And even if we have crossed the tipping points in a way that it's going to be extinction, which we might be there, we still have a choice in how we go down, in how we go extinct. We can go extinct killing each other and destroying what's left, or we can go extinct in a very different way. And whatever we learn here, because death is not the end anyway, so it's going to inform other experiments in other dimensions. I think that's where I'm coming from also with figuring out pedagogically how we stay. I think most of the book, Hospicing Modernity, is about how do we stay with the present, with what's painful and what's beautiful, with what's difficult and uncomfortable, without feeling overwhelmed, immobilized, without wanting rescue from discomfort, without wanting quick fixes, so that we can have the stomach to be present to all the shit that we need to compost without throwing up, without throwing a tantrum, and without throwing in the towel. So I think that's a summary of what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, thank you, Vanessa. And yeah, you said just already so much. And thank you also for not giving us illusions of how that it could be simpler than it actually is. I think I really appreciate that, even though it's also really hard in your book that you say it's actually really difficult to make that work. And I think something that also became very clear reading and working with the book is that modernity, even as we try to move out of it or even think that we are out of it, it keeps determining the responses to it. So it seems almost like a catch-22, and then we are in these binaries of that you also describe of like we are either trying to save, improve, innovate government systems, societies, or we just want to dismantle them, we want to defeat, replace them. And you offer hospicing modernity really as an animist practice that is somehow an alternative to transcend these binaries. I just would like to make a follow-up question here of like, if you could talk more about what does it mean in practice hospice modernity, when the system lives within us, when it conditions the way we think all the way to that it releases of neuropeptides in our brain. So what are some of the prerequisites even to do this work?
I think the first answer, the initial step, is to realize the unsustainability and violence of its creation, so that we can lose the satisfaction we have with it. Because modernity is extremely delicious in a certain way. It's like sugar is delicious, right? But if you only have sugar, you're not going to live very long. So there are things that are very pleasurable within modernity. And a friend of mine said, if colonialism was not delicious, it would have ended for a long time ago, right? So figuring out it is about an interruption. It's like an interruption of an addiction, right? We're wired to find pleasure and meaning and well-being in a very restricted way in the promises and processes that modernity upholds. Now, understanding the unsustainability and violence leads us to have a sense that we cannot invest in its futurity, right? So you work with it because if you destroy it very quickly, it causes more harm, even more harm, right? If you try to save it, it causes more harm too. So palliative care in certain contexts might be what's needed, but palliative care is what's needed in the sense of we need to offer it a dignified death. I can offer another analogy or metaphor. Like it depends on your understanding of analogy and metaphor, because it's also multiple. But when I talk about the university, for example, I work at the university. I'm actually a dean at the University of Victoria. I left UBC. So the university, when I ask people to imagine, so I say, remember the ivory tower, right? Which is the idea of the university within modernity, the apex of modernity. And the ivory tower is a place, an institution that should be detached from reality, would get the best and the brightest minds to go up that tower, look at everything and tell everybody how it should be and what to do. Now, that ivory tower was problematic from the beginning in terms of its elitism, in terms of the violence and everything that it had to do to maintain its power and privilege. But right now, we don't even have that. What we have in the current state of modernity is at best a tower of Pisa, right? It's falling. It's a leaning tower, and it's going to fall because the grounds upon which it's standing, the grounds are shaky. Now, if the university falls hard, it breaks. And all those resources that are trapped inside the university are going to go to waste. Actually, not even to waste. They are going to become pollutants and toxic waste around it. Now, if it falls softly to the ground, it may become a tree in the process and become a nursing log. When it falls to the ground, when it decomposes with the mycelium, with the moss, it will, and all the life that it's going to sponsor, it will become a nursing log for other life to grow from, right? However, in the university right now, we have people trying to put it back again as the ivory tower, we have also people trying to destroy it and kill it as fast, like burn it down. And we have less people thinking about how do we actually do this process properly, right? It needs to fall. It's going to fall anyway. But how do we lower it softly so that we unsequester the resources that have been sequestered by the university, so that the university can sponsor other kinds of life where it's actually where it needs to be, which is close to reality, close to the ground. But in order to do that, we need to disinvest in the futurity of the university as an ivory tower or as a leaning tower, and invest in the futurity of the university as a nursing log. So that is the kind of shifts. These are the kinds of shifts in perspective and movement that we need to do as we try to offer a good death for the institutions, the processes, and the sectors, I think, that we work in.
Yeah, thank you. I want to go back to Tiokasin. Both you and Vanessa mentioned relationality as a sort of, for me, it was an essential term that stood out. You also both spoke about the importance of language. Vanessa mentioned the universal reason or rationalism as one of the walls, I guess, of the House of Modernity. And you also say, Tiokasin, you keep mentioning the importance of language and how indigenous languages are a cure for the earth. If you could speak a little bit about this epistemological and ontological shift and the meaning of language in this transition, in this way back out of the house into the plenum.
Okay, thank you again, Melissa. Vanessa, just awesome. Thank you. Kind of is the honor just to listen to you sitting here. Like, wow, let's do that. You know, we can. It feels like I'm in present, and I can do that. So, I think that, you know, just a little bit on what Vanessa said, is that we have to do what's required. We can't be sitting around wishing and hoping. We have to do what's required. Mother Earth has always done that, required. I'm going to do this a roundabout way, as most Native people do things. And this may be harsh. This thought may be harsh for a lot of, especially North Americans or Americans in general, North and South. There was a Cree or an Ojibwe elder that I heard probably a few months ago, 3 months ago, who said this, and I'm paraphrasing him. He came on and he said, he was talking to a group of Canadians, and he said this. Now imagine this reversed. He said, "You people He was namely talking to Canadians, Europeans. He said, "You Europeans, you came here. We welcomed you. You brought your religions." He said, "That's yours. That's fine. We won't touch it. No one's going to take it away from you here." He said, "Then you brought your laws." He said, "That's fine. No one's going to touch it. No one's going to take that away from you. Respect that, both your religion and your laws. But the one thing that we didn't see you bring here was land. And those religions, those laws have been applied to a land that people don't know, and they still don't know. And that is an imbalance and has really taken the cures, in a sense, has banned a lot of our languages here, so that these medicine languages, and I'm saying all languages could be medicine languages if they are able to feel and think earth first. And that this is simple words, but I think about this is when I heard the story about Hillary Clinton, something about it takes a child to raise a village, or it takes a village to raise a child. And I thought, wow, that's just a cultural appropriation right there. No one's going to see it because it's a popular mainstream, and perhaps a lot of people like this way of thinking because it's an African thing, right? That's great for Africans. They know that. They practice that. They live it there. The US doesn't do that. You have neighborhoods. But the one thing that I know that's really makes a difference is I was raised in the village. I was raised with the land. If you think deeper about this, I was able to go to fresh water, crystal blue, a big river, be able to eat things right from the ground, right from the trees and bushes, be able to hunt. Everything was without the term organic. No sprays, nothing from modernity. And of course, we can't do that anymore. So I think about how I was raised is that the land raised me. And now that's not possible for us anymore. The land cannot raise you. An example here in the US, we were clustered into cluster housing, and we were made to be individuals, not a community. We were made to be neighborhoods and not know each other. So individuality stood out. We had to speak up for self, and I was a hard word to say all the time. So in our language, it was not about I, it's about all, right? The earth. So this is how thinking has returned, has not returned, but has been deterred. And the language has done that to us because it's so noun filled that we forget the living entities of all the rest of earth, that we stop including them. We isolated ourselves as a species, ourselves as even mind, and we think we are intelligent. We have technology. All of these things, it's like an addiction. Vanessa said, this is an addiction. Think how we behave when we cannot have, how we withdraw, how we treat each other when we cannot possess. So when the laws came and the religions came, a possession, this was new to us. So after a few hundred years, we are awake, and this is what Earth is doing. And Earth knows that she cannot be possessed. So when I look at this, I think about how are we going to get through this? Because a lot of people are digging holes and putting supplies in it as if they want to get through. But these are short-term examples because of the language. Now, you have forever languages, becoming Earth, knowing that we were becoming Earth when we were born into this place. that we were learning how to eat and drink, walk, talk. We didn't know that. We are in the middle now. We're doing the same thing. We're still becoming Earth. We're still doing the same functions we did when we were born. And now older people are going out. They're still becoming Earth, and they eventually will become Earth. And the cycle continues. This is why I say that we have to do what's required. And I probably be way off the question that you asked. I don't know, it's in there somewhere. Your answer is there. So if you talk to a Native people, they will never, or not never, but they probably will not give you a direct answer.
Yeah, and I love that. And every time I've interviewed you or been in conversation, you have answered the question perfectly, and it was never a literal direct response. So I deeply appreciate that. Yeah. And I also, I remember you talking about Einstein and other scientists coming in contact with Native people, and how it's been very easy to kind of align these concepts. Maybe it's just another way into the question of languages, of relationality. Yeah, it would be interesting just to tease out a little bit more the kind of ontological difference and how you relate.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean, this is what I use an example all the time, which and a lot of the more fluent Lakota speakers would say you can't really take things apart in our language. But I attempt to. So I'm going to do this. For example, the water, the film that you have of water, it is a beautiful name. And if you, as we say, it's a beautiful name if someone is named water. But what if you didn't have the word for water in your language? What would that do to your thinking process right now? The word for water? Well, what do you mean? So you begin to doubt, you begin to question. You're like, wait a minute, now they are in another world. This is what I'm getting at, Martin, is if you don't have a word for water, then what is it? It's not a noun, it's not a place, or not a thing. It's something that is alive, always, has ever been. And its consciousness is everywhere. So many, I would describe this. You would say water. M-N-I, is E is like living, or voicing, excuse me. Ni is like living, and is that which is the relationship between you and I and all things. So you're actually saying, voicing the living relationship between you and I and all things. And that's our meaning of water in context of another language. So this is the consciousness that we are avoiding by destroying the earth. And this is the differences in how we think. And this is the languages of non-concepts, non-duality, is that you include all feeling rather than theory, because we're dealing with reality. We're doing what's required to be here in order to get through this peak of crisis, because we have forgot our relationship with Earth. And this is worldwide. People are now forgetting Earth, and they're wanting to get more money. They're wanting the answer. More books coming out to give you the answer. There's more of these Zooms, online things. But when you stop about it, Vanessa knows that when you're in ceremony, it's another world. All this head trips that we talk about languages that leave you that there's an elitism when we speak academically. That's a codified language that only a few are privy to. When the world does not speak this way, Earth doesn't speak academics. So when you're in ceremony, we are all balanced and equalized. And that's what we're in present. We have to be. Can't be ahead of ourselves or behind ourselves. So I just want to say that. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for invoking the ceremonial space. And I also feel a bit funny because I will kind of ask another question in academic that I actually feel I'm just asking the same thing over and over, but it's great. We're rolling in the space. Actually want to turn it to Vanessa. It's very much related. So with the disenchantment with modernity and the violence that we're seeing, there's so many people wanting to turn to more earth-centered ways of living. And there is a recognition of how modernity's violence is based on an objectification of earth. But I also find that a lot of the non-Indigenous people seeking these ways that we continue to relate from the same kind of subject-object division, even in our romantic projection of earth. And we have these very new agey, blurry notions of Pachamama and animism. And I found it very refreshing in your book that you brought both kind of very spiritual, but also very practical notion of earth as a land metabolic intelligence, a land metabolism. And I wonder if you could expand a little bit on that and like what it actually takes for people to participate in that metabolic process.
Thank you, Martin. I think you started where I think it's a good point to start. The idea of the box doesn't fit anymore, like as a navigational tool for reality of modernity, and then people want to escape that, right? And generally, when they encounter this eco-centered traditions or even ideas, the first impulse is to want to connect, as Tiokasin said, connect with everything that's beautiful as a form of soothing, right, for the anxieties you have. So you want to connect with the whales, the flowers, the moon, the stars, the sun, but not with the shit, which is also part of the metabolism. So we want to skip the shit into the rainbow, basically, of these beautiful connections. And that then becomes it's very difficult to bring people back, actually, into then facing the shit with that and developing the stomach to not throw up or throw a tantrum or throw in the towel. So I think there's an initiation process, I think, where the rainbow needs to come in too, like the rainbow as this other possibilities of well-being that are outside the confines and constraints of modernity need to help us in the process. We cannot just compost shit from where we are within modernity. We need the cracks, right? The light coming through the cracks, but we can't escape into that crack and go somewhere else. That's escapism. So how do we allow this other ways of well-being to help us compost the shit and develop the stamina to be able to do the difficult and painful work that we need to do with grief, for example? So de-romanticizing nature and understanding it as a metabolism of cycles of life and death that we are part of requires a transcendence of the dualism of this is good, this is bad, this is pleasant, this is unpleasant, and I'm only going for what is pleasant over there. I remember I came to Canada married into a Blackfoot and Cree family. We do Sundance with the Blackfoot in Kainai. And one of my Sundance sisters was also my niece in terms of the family tree. She came to Victoria, where I am, land of the Songhees and the Esquimalt Indigenous peoples, and we went to a waterfall, right? And she looked at me and said, what is the name of this waterfall in the language of the place? And I said, I have no idea, because there's nothing in this park that gives you that indication, and I haven't had the time or the space to be able to develop the relationships where Indigenous people would introduce me to this being. And I said, then what do we do? And she said, I will have to talk in Blackfoot to the waterfall in a very generic way. And I said, okay, can you help me with that and understand a little bit of Blackfoot? So she referred to the waterfall as Itapi. Itapi is sacred being. And what she said next was, I see you, I breathe you, I am you. And I understand, and then she apologized for not knowing exactly the name that the local people or that the other entities around it called her, because that relationship is only being acknowledged at that point. And she was not building a relationship. She was acknowledging an already existing relationship. She was not trying to connect. She was acknowledging an already existing relationship. And she said something about, I breathe you. The water is in your body. I breathe you. You are in me. And I'm here to pay homage to you and to ask you what you want me to do. And back to what Tiokasin said, you're asking what needs to happen. What do you want? What do you need me to do, rather than what do I want to do, right? And you're using the time and energy that this water gives you in giving back in reciprocity. I put my time and energy in service. Please give me the inspiration that will help me understand your guidance in my pathway. As you are an older, she then went on to say, you're an older relation, you're an older family member. You know better what needs to happen than I do as a young sister in this relationship, in the wider scale of time of existence, right? So I thought it was so beautiful to see, and we tend to to go back to relationship building, but it's not a building because the relationship is already there, always already there. And it's not like acknowledgement doesn't do it either, right? It's not an acknowledgement, it's a something of refiring of that tether that she had in that prayer. It was a kind of and it's biochemical, actually. It's a biochemical thing that thinks and that happens in that tether that then establishes a form of communication that goes beyond what humans can fully understand, but that is felt in the body if you have all the receptors open. So back to the question around how do we need the language of initiation that mixes the language that is existing within modernity with languages that are not necessarily acknowledged. And we need to reactivate capacities that have been exiled by the house so that we can keep taking one step at a time in this process. So the university, in this sense, the university is where people go for legitimate knowledge. It has been, but it's no longer, actually, but there's still a pipeline through the university. So it's a place where if we can hack and create the fractures there, for me at least, hack it, create the fractures there, we could use the university also together and with the support with the communities of getting people safely through the cracks without escapism. And that is a slow process of deep learning. That's why we call it depth education, or death education. But it is an initiation. It's an initiation that interrupts certain addictions or has the power to, it's rehab, but it also opens up or activates capacities that have been exiled within the house of modernity, and trying to understand this process, what needs to be interrupted, what needs to be reactivated, and at what time, because there is a timing in this, there's an arc of the process. It's not everything like available. You need to be ready. You need to be ready, and you need to be strong enough to take the next step. So accompanying people in this process has been extremely interesting, from the university back to the land, and trying to map the traps that happen on the way, right? Where people fall off, and what kinds of rail guards we need so that the journey is smooth. There's not unnecessary distress, unnecessary struggle. So that's one of the things I've been trying to do from the university, but you can do that from any institution out, and it's through the cracks of the institution, through where the institutions are breaking already, that this becomes possible. So I work a lot with people in organizations that are saying nothing else works. And it's interesting because generally when I started this work, I used to think about collapse as around you, social and ecological collapse around you. But working with the Winiecki people in the Amazon, they are really worried about the internal collapse, right? The ways in which our psychological setup within modernity cannot sustain like life and well-being as defined by modernity through the decline of modernity, where in the decline of modernity, back to what you asked, is where we have cross-planetary boundaries. So that house of modernity exceeds the limits of the planet. And this is coming back to bite us in the butt. And then our psychological structure can't hold it, right? So the idea of shit, the metaphorical shit we need to compass is back to the metabolism of the land. And how do we develop the stomach to do that safely without throwing up on each other, on ourselves, without throwing a tantrum and then hijacking all the space and time of everybody else who's with you for your drama, or throwing in the towel and saying, that's it, there's nothing for me to do. I'm just either going to live my best life or exit from the body, right? So there's lots of options there. What we want to see happening is people figuring out there's a way. We need a shit composting party. It's not about drowning in the sadness and anger and frustration and burnout. It is about figuring out something that is unimaginable for those who are drowning right now, which is the idea of swimming. And not just swimming, but learning to grow the gills, to become the water, right?
I think that's awesome, the way you talk about that. You know, I wanted to ask you the perspective, Vanessa, if I was told as a younger person not to lose basically the view from the shore as an indigenous person, and not to, take on what the ships have brought, that we need to keep that, the original seed or the land, so that the land doesn't lose that understanding. Because science is also another definition of how to measure, weigh, and hold the land as property, as domination. And I find that a lot of thought processes that indigenous peoples have, maybe it's on the opposites, but in old Lakota, there is no words, there's no thought for opposites. We don't even have the word for opposites. Yeah, that kind of opens up the mind, the heart especially. So when prophecy comes in, it's in context of a lived experience, and that lived experience is talking about non-punitive. This is why there's the future in this sense is so wide open. It's just not, okay, we're going to a doomsday scenario, and all human life is going to go, Earth can do well without humans. So we go to those thought processes. The other one is the one constant I've heard throughout my life, and America is a mindset. Where did it come from? It came from those ships, right? So the short sentence I would to say is that when Floyd Redcrow Westerman, who's not here anymore, he defined it as, we would see America come and America go. And that's the process we're in now. The mindset that you talk about in your book is that prophecy that we are required to understand and not go back to the drawing board as we do and as the ships do, to bring new plans and new ways, progress. The COP 25, 26, 27s that happen every year, all these things that are held that common people do not have privy to. There's a question in there someplace.
Thank you. I will say what story came up for me, because we just had Indigenous Language Conference here in Victoria. There's a Department of Indigenous Language Revitalization in my university, in my faculty actually, that is really moving in the direction of language as medicine. And the first acknowledgement is that English and other imperial languages that have done a lot of the harm are languages of separability. The human versus nature and land as property is one of the ontic the foundations of the way of being that then is reproduced through the language, right? So it's very difficult to even talk about these things, to communicate these things through a language that is inherently grounded on the separation and on the opposites and on the ranking and the competition, right? So figuring out how to create a transitional language that moves us away through metaphor, through story, or whatever, dance, movement, body, get us out of the meaning making through separability is the first step. We need a way out of there. And then there's something about reasoning that I also learned through the ceremonies, which is like this. So that's my analysis back from the ceremony. In modern education, what we are taught to do with reality is that we see the multiple layers of reality all around and they are moving and we can't, it's too much. Then we collapse all these layers into one layer, all collapsed. And then we impose a narrative of coherence grounded in the language of separation. We edit out what doesn't fit and we police the borders. So we have this fixed story, and if reality doesn't fit this fixed story, we police it. It has to fit. It has to be in the should, not in the is, not present to what is, but imposing what should. The problem is that when there is a context of hypercomplexity, when reality is really changing very fast, at a different pace and quality than we used before, this creates a pressure cooker, right? And then all the anxiety and sadness and anger and burnout, everything is held by this policing thing, by that valve. And that's where we are with each other. If we can't find a way, as Indigenous people have in languages that are medicine, of again allowing these layers of complexity of reality to move so that you're present to it, holding in one hand compassion, in another hand accountability, right? How can we be present to what's presenting without being in that should pressure cooker imposition or projection of reality, so that even without that, there's no way of even figuring out what we need to do, right? Because when we get together, now we gather and everybody is in their pressure cooker of projections and anxieties, we are competing for which pressure cooker is going to be dominant in a certain context. Now, if we all were able to hold the complexity, if we all could take a step back and be present to what's presenting, if we all could evoke the tethers with the land, the waters, if we all could evoke the guidance that comes from the land itself, through your dreams, through your inspiration, through your intuition, we would be able to be together in a very different way. We would be able to coordinate in a very different way. And this way doesn't say that's exactly where we're going to get. No, because it's every step is negotiated with the metabolism itself and that we are part of. We can't see where we're going to get to.
No, that's beautiful. I think about the verbing, a verbing that's present in our languages keeps us moving with the changing, and that is so enlightening and energizing, and just the world opens up where you see that the world is really not opposite of each other. That's where we've been duality programmed into thinking. So John Gatto, as I usually use, of New York State after he retired, he said it takes 12 years to learn how to become reflexive to authority. And that's what we have to understand. Whose authority are we listening to, right? So, and again, verbing, as you say, is if we noun everything, we have definition for it, we stagnate. Our religions, our laws, right? And then there's peoples who just don't understand those laws, like Native people. We don't understand those religions. We don't understand those laws. They just confuse us.
Yeah.
But we do seem to understand the naturing of what's going on with Earth as well as ourselves. I'm not romanticizing ourselves. This is what we have to do, required to in order to keep things moving, and that we feel in rhythm and our balance comes back, and the frustrations and the anxiety that people are feeling out there, the world's going to wherever, as you say, it's going to shit. It's like, oh, maybe it is, but we're not smelling the stink that we are creating. So that's verbing the language. And this is available even in English. You have to re-look at this language again and understand it, and not just go with the trendiness of it. So yeah, thank you for that. That was awesome.
Thank you. Back to Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's very generous what you're offering to us. I'm glad we are recording to be able to go back. And yeah, I would like also that we open it up now for questions from the participants. I also need to say that Vanessa will leave in about 15 minutes, I guess. So if you have questions specifically to her, maybe we can take those first, and you can just click on the hand raise sign and we'll call you. Yeah, we'll also just take a moment to breathe. Hi, Anna Margarita.
Oops. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm in a public place. I'm very grateful for Vanessa's words. And it's good to see you again, Vanessa, since last year. I have a question regarding what you said about the role of the university nowadays as a dying institution from the dying system we know as modernity, about transforming the university into a kind of a feeding log for new species. What do you think about micro accreditations and partnerships within the university and communities or NGOs as a strategy for achieving that goal? Do you think it's a viable strategy for that kind of decomposing and death midwifing, or do you think that there's a great risk that it might be more of the same and that it might end up leading to co-optation? I would like to hear your honest opinion and, if possible, some examples. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, it's a quick answer. I think it's both. It's both a risk, but then it's a risk to what? And it is it's an opportunity. So micro credentials are no barrier. It's okay. So how do I explain? So the university used to, still does have the degree systems, right? That would be recognized by society in terms of what people know in each discipline or profession. Now, what has happened in the last 20 years is that the way that the university builds those degrees is perceived by organizations and by society is shifting too fast for this to follow in the follow the pace. So some companies and organizations are asking the university to create quicker courses that can that are skills based, and then that can put people in the market already ready to work, and rather than go through the academic degree, which is 4 years and all of that. So then we have micro credentials as a way to have low barrier or no barrier courses for people. They're not degree bearing, but they allow you to study at the university, do a course, and then go back and have the stamp of the university, but not have to do the whole degree, basically. And in doing that, so if I wanted to create a new degree in depth education, it would take me 2 or 3 years to get all the approvals and consultations within the academic environment for this to happen. Now, if I want to do to teach a course on depth education, which is exactly what I'm going to do next at 10 o'clock here, if I want to do it through a micro-credential, it takes me 2 months to create one and get it out there, right? So it's much easier for people who are inside the university, who get it, to be able to create courses that you can teach and that don't have to go through the same processes as the degree processes. So if you look at it like that, lots of opportunities there. We have the course Facing Human Wrongs, that is a micro-credential. We have the course on depth education, that is a micro-credential. And depending on how you use it, you can use it for that. And we're opening up 21 courses in this area for school, for teachers and health practitioners and leaders in the micro-credential sector. Do people use it for other means? Of course they do, right? So and some people would say that the micro-credentials are going to kill the university faster because people are not coming for the degrees anymore. They want to create their own degrees. They want to pick up the courses and say, this is my skill set, rather than have it defined by a group of academics, right? So this is kind of the debate. I think it's a great opportunity. If you know what you're doing, get out there, get these people coming through and offer them something different. You can do that through the university. Now, other people will take it and transform it in more commercially viable and neoliberal things. Yes, they will too. It's the layers. It's very different layers. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, David.
Unmute. There we are. Okay. Wow. I'm in awe. I'm absolutely, I mean, reading Hospicing Modernity has turned my world inside out, and I'm still struggling with it, and probably will for the rest of my life. But one thing that hasn't come up is the trauma of Europe, the absolute destruction of the European understanding of connection to land, and how that threatened the hegemony of the church and all the politics that were behind that, and how this has never been resolved. That trauma was brought to the Americas, to Asia, to Africa, and I'm just wondering your opinion on whether with the merit of trying to go back and resolve that trauma as a way of healing, or whether we have to just be present in the present moment and deal with what we got.
Thank you, David. I think it's so many thoughts, but the trauma is here. There's no past. So past, present, and future are in the same place. And for us to be present to what's here, that thing is still here. That's part of the shit we have inherited. It's epigenetic shit that's coming through. So yes, but I would say it's much older than that. If we look at time, right, in a much wider scale, and if we see this waves of imperialism coming through and intersecting, and it's like, think about it as a wave. It goes up and it crashes, right? The last one we have was British imperialism, like coming up as a big wave, but we have also ripples of other imperialisms around it, and they're imperialisms, and it's not just European, right? So if you have that, then there's now the American imperialism also kind of cresting and crashing, and there are other imperialisms lurking about too, and figuring out a way we can hold this without arrogance, without this sense of there are ways of holding this that are not sustaining or sustainable. So bringing in humor and making, I had a friend, Catherine Adora Hoppers, who works with indigenous knowledge systems, telling me this week that unless we take the piss out of it, out of what's really violent, and we can't, like, it kills us basically, right? So we have to find a way to relate to it where it doesn't kill us. And when it is arrogant, when it is kind of when it is filled with anger has a place. I'm not discounting that, but there's a poison that a concoction, an alchemic poison that sometimes when we're confronting this the shit, it won't allow us to keep composting it in a shit composting party. So the party part is really important, because without joy in composting, we're not going to have much stamina to keep doing it. We will, and it's very easy to find a place of the shit and to drown in the sadness. It's probably diarrhea there. You drown in the sadness, pain, and frustration of it. So I've been writing another book, the follow-up with the collective of Hospicing Modernity, which is called Outgrowing Modernity, Navigating Complexity, Complicity, Collapse, with compassion and accountability. And in the book, what I think the book is trying to do is just it's telling people from the increase of the collective what we've learned about being present to the shit. Not that we know everything, but we've tried with groups and with ourselves to really come to this place and be and sniff it, as Tiokasin said, and touch it with gloves probably, or without them, but figuring out what kind of relationship is sustainable and sustaining in being present to that. And that involves what has happened in Europe. Many authors actually, like Walter Vignolo, they say that the design of modernity, or the design of the current imperialisms, we have started with colonialism within Europe. Right. And then if we look at the residues of that in earlier colonialisms and imperialisms in Europe, you will see that conflicts that are happening today, and they're horrendous today, are playing with those residues, right? And I'm thinking about the Ottoman Empire, the Western Empire, and things that happened way before, but that were also predicated on land as property and land in the separability between humans and the land. So lots of work to do in terms of learning how to compost together and how to create the shit composting party that is necessary for us to face the wrongs of humanity without freaking out and without relationships falling apart.
Thank you, Janet.
Okay. Kwe sego sewa kwego Janet Jungyat Ganyankahaga Ohanjage the Gidalon Gayogo Kono. So I just wanted to welcome everyone in my language, and I want to say that my name is Janet Gajichawanta Gray. I come from the roots from the as you know would know, Mohawk people on my mother's side, and my father's side is from across the Great Waters. Origin unknown due to Indian Reorganization Act of 1934. And I currently live on the Cayuga territories, and I'm really honored to be here because yesterday I learned how to go look up what watershed that I actually live within, which is actually the Oswego River watershed. Anyway, so I don't know if I have a question or a comment, or maybe it's a mixture of both in regards to what Floyd Red Crow Westman was saying about America will come and go. And I feel like we're in that process now, like many of us can see that. But what I'm wondering about, what I've always wondered about, because I grew up in foster care And so I've been exposed to a lot of right wing or white supremacist or indoctrination. And I don't say that I'm not trying to come off like a racist. I'm just trying to identify my experience. And I'm also very nervous. So I'm kind of not, my vocabulary is not like where I want it to be. So anyway, so what I'm trying to figure out here is that with these how do people, like, money still is so prevalent in this society. It's like it's like, for me, money is one of the biggest problems in the colonial, like what the colonial agenda has brought to Mother Earth. So how do we how can people not be afraid when people don't even know how to behave with Mother Earth? And the colonial constructs of communism and socialism are not any better than democapitalism. And even within the indigenous cultures, their knowledge and wisdom and their ways of relating have been so disseminated. And as I walk through this life, I have seen all these things, and walking through the deterioration, trying to be separate from it, but being forced to live within it and being isolated, where I've even had people, when I've tried to join intentional communities, say I couldn't join because I chose money, but yet they don't know me, and it's like, well, yeah, I've had to work in order to survive, because when I tried to seek out gathering land for intentional communities back in the 80s, I was under attack by, native and non-native people. And not to be putting anyone down, because I think it's all about principles. It's not, I really hate the word racism in a sense, but it's also like Tiokasin was saying, like talking in English, it really kind of blocks the communication. So anyway, so what I'm wondering is that colonial has done everything through successive approximations over centuries, and like they've got, to me it seems like they've had it's just so sophisticated what they do. So and I do believe that we need an indigenous re-education, that's put forth into the world, but do we have enough time? Let's put it this way. I'm wondering if the successive approximations back to Mother Earth are not happening fast enough in regards to the collapse, or, I don't know, because I guess my biggest thing, like when I was growing up, was like what they told us, like how they taught us to believe that, like World War III is inevitable anyway. And I always perceive if World War III happens, it's not just going to affect Mother Earth, but then it's going to it's going to affect the rest of the universe outside of Earth, outside of, within our solar system, and I don't know, maybe outside of it too. I don't know. It's just my wild guesses. But with that, I'll shut up. And thank you, Nyawa.
Yeah, Janet, thank you. I will have to go, so I'll leave Tiokasin to respond. I just wanted to say goodbye to everybody, and thank you for holding space for us today. And Tiokasin, I'll be in contact. There's more we need to do together.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you.
But it's such an honor to hear you and talk with you and have good ceremonies.
It's amazing to be with you too. And thank you, Martin, for organizing this. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. An honor.
Well, I'm going to take off on what Vanessa was talking about earlier, that, we're in conflict. We're in conflict with each other, ideologies, but one thing that should be mentioned is that we are in conflict with Earth. It basically is we're at war with Earth because of the control and domination, the ownership, property lines, measurements, weighing, and who owns who, possession. So this possession language that I talk about is a key we can't own anything, but we are led to down the line over centuries to say that that's what counts. So it devalues our spirit, and it brings, how do you say, sort of a monetary assessment of how much you are really, truly worth. And that's how we measure our personal value in this world. And so this is something hard to understand, but a lot of Native people have been colonized so much that we begin to blame. We blame others, other human beings, and that's very anthropocentric. But we don't see our own footsteps as how we are living with Earth. So we are actually being colonized as I speak this language. So it's important to understand who we are and not just go with who we aren't. You know, and that takes more of a lifetime, not just theory or, you know, some kind of psychological assessment. It takes going deeper, which the language is really, if you understood it more rather than a noun codified, standardized language, we're having to speak in order to explain in definition without meaning. This is a problem for a lot of indigenous people, that we have to take meaning out of what we're really feeling and put it into a mindset of theory and concepts. So I would understand it that way and say that's not an answer, but it is a possibility.
Thank you. Stephen, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, that was
Yes,
probably.
I did. My questions actually were for Vanessa.
Yeah.
So it was just actually about how we might communicate with Earth, how we might learn to listen as a kind of community of practice, as she recommends in Hospicing Modernity, and just what gesturing toward decolonial futures collective is. How do we get involved in something like that?
Well, I can't, as you know, think about what Vanessa's would feel, say, and answer this, but again, it goes back to the languages. I think the core of our languages, all languages have to have a seeding somewhere. And if we're going with the outer skin, basically, and not really going to the heart of who we are with our languages, we need to feel Earth again, not theorize Earth and economically, to get ourselves out of economics and see it differently. Not because that's the economics today, is that we are economically involved with our value, our worth, our self-worth. And so again, it's the verbs within our languages. All of our languages can do that, but we've gotten a way to think a standardized, noun-filled, stagnating, and this is the end of it, as we say, the end of empire, the end of the value system, and we're nothing without that monetary value that we're taught to believe in. So this is a time of, as we would say, the time of believing is over. It's a time of knowing. And that would frighten a lot of people if they do not know Earth. So theory is going to have to go out, because the practicality of mystery is living that mystery to practical Earth, because it has to do with, in short, we as a human species are at war with Earth. That's the bottom line. It's a simpler language, but that's how I would answer that one for myself and for you, Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you. And also we will post links into the summit space about the collective and Hospicing Modernity. So there's also, on that level, there will also be an answer. And thank you for your response, Tiokasin. I think we have space for one short question.
Wow.
There we go, Mali.
Okay, much gratitude for this presentation, and big bow and respect to Tiokasin and to Vanessa here and Shannon. Hello. My understanding is the verb-based language that Tiokasin talks about is so powerful in the way that it's always in a movement, and everything is in a movement. And so when I first heard about this, it completely changed the way I see things. The way when you mentioned how there is no, it's always in a moment, everything is in a moment. So I would love to hear you perhaps mention a little bit about this, but also because the water is always in a movement as well. And when we are in some circles with the elders, indigenous elders, the way they introduce themselves is by the waters, by the land. And it really staggers me how that really puts us in a different place as well, and how we instantly relate rather than divide by the borders, and it connects us all. So perhaps if you can speak a little bit into that, how people introduce themselves and speaking with this verb-based language and also connection with the water. Thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you. The water, meaning we chose on it, we say to a lot of people, which doesn't mean water is life, it's deeper than that. So I'm gonna go with when I'm with elders, there is no time. Time is taken out. The question of time, how long it's gonna last, or shall we wait for an answer? There's no really a reply. If you ask a question, there may not be a reply. But we're taught to do that in this society. You ask a question, then there's a reply. That's very dualistic. There is no feeling. So when you're with elders, you may wait for 5 minutes because we're feeling the energy. And as you know, energy cannot be changed or created or destroyed, excuse me. And that's what we do with the languages that we speak, verbing, are always presently moving. We know that everything, we use Blackout because he says that the center of the universe is everywhere. And how do we know that without having some kind of physics application to it? So I think if we understood that we need to speak without time, that would be a hard thing because we are addicted to time, because Earth is not addicted to time. So speaking with Earth, being with Earth, becoming Earth would be that answer. But there's no quick answer to that in this society, with this language, actually. So that is a ponderance that we need to feel and not think. But thank you for being here, and thank you, Martine, for this. And I'm sure Vanessa will express the same.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for, I said it already, but I feel so much generosity in all that you offer. I feel very gifted, and yeah, sending a lot of gratitude and love to you. And I will also share links to Tiokasin's Akanto Institute and First Voices Radio, so that you can tune more into Tiokasin's work. Yeah, thank you so much.
I have a book coming out soon. It's called Earth Mind. It's with a quantum physicist and someone else that is a very deep thinker. So look to that in the next within the next year.
Wow.
Earth Mind. Yes. Great. Thank you, everybody.